Why would the US dollar have to reprice to Bitcoin?
There's no way to pay the debt off, right? And debt is far higher than GDP. Something has to give. Either there's a debt jubilee all around, or you have to reprice or rebase to a harder asset. It's difficult at this time to imagine the creation of a new dollar. They have a choice to go to Bitcoin or to accept a new fiat. And I just don't believe that will be the case.
How is Bitcoin going to react to the election season and cycle? We'll talk about this with Samson Mow. He is a CEO of Jan3. Welcome to the show, Samson. Good to see you.
Good to see you again, David. It's been a while.
It's been a while indeed. Lots has happened in cryptos and Bitcoin since last we talked a couple of years ago. We talked, I think, during the bull cycle of 2021. So lots has changed. We'll talk about what's changed. But before we talk about the broader crypto landscape, few things you've been involved with. So the HBO documentary, which revealed supposedly who Satoshi Nakamoto is. We'll talk about that. And you've been in the press talking about $1 million Bitcoin. That's your projection or prediction. Can you elaborate on that? What's up with that prediction?
Yeah, so I believe Bitcoin is severely undervalued right now. Even anywhere sub 100K is just a very rare anomaly. We should have been far higher than 100,000 right now, but I believe we're on track to 1 million. The ETFs have been an enormous influx of capital into Bitcoin, but that has been muted by the unwinding of GBTC or grayscale Bitcoin. So I think my prediction was earlier this year that the ETFs would send us there. I still believe that that will be the case, but it has been muted because of the unwinding of all the drama, I guess, that is largely held over from FTX until now. So we're getting to the point where we should be going parabolic very soon.
Is there a particular reason or catalyst that will send it parabolic?
Well, there's a number of reasons. Like, first of all, you can look at the macroeconomic landscape and the massive accumulation of debt in the US. Interest payments are getting to $1 trillion a year. And I don't think most people realize, but these are astronomical numbers and these are absolutely unsustainable. So either there's going to be a debt jubilee or the US dollar has to rebase to Bitcoin. So, one Satoshi, there's 100 million Satoshis in a Bitcoin, and you could reprice the US dollar to one Satoshi equals $1.
Why would the US dollar have to reprice to Bitcoin?
Well, I mean, there's no way to pay the debt off, right? And debt is far higher than GDP. Yeah. So something has to give. Either there's a debt jubilee all around, or you have to reprice or rebase to a harder asset. And it's difficult at this time to imagine the creation of a new dollar. Like you have that in many countries, when the fiat currency fails, you just make a new one and you lop off some zeros. But with the advent of Bitcoin, it's no longer possible because people they have an option now. They have a choice to go to Bitcoin or to accept a new fiat. And I just don't believe that will be the case. Therefore, it is inevitable that we do rebase to Bitcoin eventually. The question is when. But I believe $1 to one Satoshi is a fair rebase plan.
So you've done work on country adoption of Bitcoin in the past. Suppose the US were to adopt Bitcoin under this plan, $1 to one Satoshi. What would that process look like? What would that transition look like?
Well, it's difficult to say, but under a Trump administration, I believe we could see the start of that, which is the adoption of Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset. So President Trump and Senator Cynthia Lummis have announced plans to create this strategic Bitcoin reserve. So to begin with, they would accumulate a massive amount of Bitcoin, potentially 1 million coins. And I think from there, the rebasement is just a matter of time when the fiat currency fails. When people no longer want to accept the dollar, then you kind of have to say, well, we will rebase to Satoshis as the underlying currency. And Trump has hinted of this. He said, maybe we pay off the debt by giving people a bit of Bitcoin. And I don't know if he's exactly thinking of rebasing to Bitcoin, but he's hinting, or at least his line of thought is moving in that direction.
Has Bitcoin made any progress towards hyper-Bitcoinization or, the concept of mass adoption of Bitcoin since 3 years ago?
I would say so. These things are very sudden. If you look at the failure of fiat currencies, they don't gradually fail. They fail spectacularly. And this is the premise behind the 1 million Bitcoin call, that it's not going to be a gradual, slow increase to $1 million a coin, but rather a very short and violent upheaval that sends us there in a matter of months, weeks to months. And if you look at the hyper Bitcoinization landscape, what you do see is more and more countries coming out and mining Bitcoin. Bhutan, I think, is the clearest example of this. They have close to $1 trillion now in Bitcoin holdings from mining over the past 4 to 5 years. So if this is not an indication that hyper Bitcoinization is coming, I'm not really sure what is. But countries that have excess energy, they can tap into that now and convert that into money and use that money for financing lots of different things. I believe we're also on the verge of countries issuing debt, sovereign debt, to buy Bitcoin. So the Bitcoin bond program, it is going to come simply because the MicroStrategy model has illustrated that this works, and it works very well. And it's just simply a matter of time before a country pulls that trigger and unleashes a torrent of sovereign debt to acquire Bitcoin.
And what about on the consumer side? Any advancements towards the adoption of Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, B2B or even B2C, since 3 years ago?
Well, El Salvador has rolled out, their Bitcoin legal tender law, and we've seen a decent amount of adoption in El Salvador. But all over the world, you see a lot of Bitcoin adoption, but I wouldn't say it's at the hyper Bitcoinization level yet, simply because I think the wallet infrastructure is not there. It's still very difficult to onboard people into Bitcoin. And this is something we're trying to solve at Jan 3 with our Aqua wallet. It's a Bitcoin and Layer 2 wallet. And the goal is that we can use Layer 2 technologies like Liquid to onboard the next billion people to Bitcoin in a very simple and easy to use manner.
Do you think the average person will ever need to use Bitcoin or adopt Bitcoin as a medium of exchange or payment? Why not use a stable coin if you want to use blockchain technology or maybe just digital fiat? What are the advantages of using Bitcoin?
Well, there's two dimensions here. We do see a massive amount of stablecoin adoption, particularly in Latin America and just generally developing countries. And this is more driven out of necessity. So they're not really seeking Bitcoin. They're seeking US dollars or digital dollars. And in places like Latin America, they don't even say tether. Like they just say digital dollars because for them it's synonymous. But they are seeking out stability in light of their currency problems at home and the debasement and inflation of their own currencies. So I believe that as Bitcoiners and people trying to push for Bitcoin adoption, we can leverage that and bring people into Bitcoin by offering stable coins in a Bitcoin wallet, which has not been something that most Bitcoin wallets have focused on in the past, but is something that we are very much focused on. So that's sort of a Trojan horse for us, getting more people that are just looking for digital dollars into Bitcoin. But to answer your other question, I believe everyone will eventually have to use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, simply because no one will want dollars in the end. So if the dollar keeps devaluing, which it has been over the past 100 years, almost to zero, then eventually people will say, I will not sell you this bread or these eggs for dollars. I want Bitcoin. And this is at the point at which you don't have a choice. You have to adopt Bitcoin as your currency, because if you do not do that, then you won't be able to buy anything. So it's sort of an inevitability.
Well, that becomes a problem, doesn't it? Because if you are the holder of Bitcoin, maybe you would choose not to buy your bread with Bitcoin because you know the value of Bitcoin will continue to appreciate, whereas bread will not.
Well, I think most Bitcoiners, like a fair amount of Bitcoiners, don't want to spend their Bitcoin, but
Sure.
a good portion do, simply for the goal of spreading awareness and adoption.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a simple way around that, which is spend and replace. So while you can still buy Bitcoin with dollars, you can spend the Bitcoin and replace it by buying it back later. And in doing so, you're sort of fostering the emergence of circular economies where people accept Bitcoin and they spend Bitcoin out again. But we have to start somewhere, and we have to jumpstart that process somehow.
Well, you've been warning of these covert operations to subvert state level adoption of Bitcoin. Can you comment on this?
Yeah, so there are definitely forces out there that don't want Bitcoin to be adopted. Some of it is not so covert. So you see the IMF actively at work trying to convince El Salvador to roll back or dial back their Bitcoin law or minimize it in some way. You've also seen the IMF exert pressure on Argentina. If you go back a couple of years, you'll see Argentina had a sort of a letter of intent saying they're not going to do anything with Bitcoin. But in other places too, that countries we've engaged in, such as Suriname, we met with their central bank, we presented a plan there, and then a few